y'all doing tonight? I'm Dale. I'm alcoholic. That's probably the most important thing I'll say tonight. You know, Steve called me up the other day and asked me, and I got a bunch of readings that I do in the morning to make provisions for a day of sobriety. And so I got up this morning, and I was reading my books, and I started off with a daily reflections 24 years ago, and now I've got about 6 or 7 that I read now. And so it takes me a while to get out of the house in the morning with these readings I got. This book right here is one that, it's not an AA approved book, but it's one that my daddy read, and this is his book. And Tom knew my dad good. He hired my daddy in the central prison out there. And when I opened this book up this morning, it was, I didn't even realize it, but it was his birthday. You know, May 7th was his birthday. And this reading in here, it was talking, what it is a drunk wrote this book with 40 years of sobriety. His name was Robbie R. He would take a Bible verse and then he would put it into drunk language, what that verse meant. And I picked this book up after about 5 years in here when my sponsor would let me. You know, he told me not to read anything without a circle and a triangle until I got sober. Then he said I could venture out. So this is one of them I ventured out with, and I felt like if my daddy stayed sober till he died, then maybe it'd help me stay sober till I die. You know, I remember he used to tell me, you know, I want to die sober. That's my goal in life. Good goal. But let's don't load the bus too quick. You know, let's stay around a while first. It said, who shall ascend unto the hill of the Lord, or who shall stand in his holy place? He who hath clean hands, a pure heart, who hath not lifted up his soul to vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. And that second part of that verse, I did it regular. You know, then this drunk says, this is as definite as a left jab to the chin. Said it tells me in plain language what I must do if I want to get right and sober. I don't have to do it, mind you. I continue to be stupid just as long as I want to. And Daddy wrote on here on the 5th month, the 7th day of 89. That's when his birthday was. He wrote on there, so much wisdom as a birthday thought for Dale Starbuck Jr. And so little did he know that the next morning at 9 o'clock he would be deceased. You know? So the next day, the 8th, I wrote in the book, Dale Starbuck Jr. passed away today, 5/8/89. He is with Mom and God now. Rest in peace, Dale. And his sobriety date was written in here. It was 3/30/67. And Wallace Bryant sent me a picture one time, and it was in 1970 of him and my dad up at Blackstone. And Wallace was still in central prison. And my daddy carried him out and carried him up to Blackstone, to the retreat up there. And it's these things right here that you don't realize. You never know when you write something in a book, or you're thinking an AA thought, or you're helping another drunk, or you're speaking somewhere, or whatever you're doing for AA. You never know when the next day your ticket could get punched. Or you might not be here. No, my daddy, he kind of believed in living like he wasn't never going to die. Let's have a great day every day. You know, and I wish I could keep that attitude up sometimes. Sometimes I get beat down. I kind of sort of don't want to do that. You know, but I've learned a lot reading these books these other people have, and venturing out a little bit from AA. I got sober on March the 18th, 1991. My home group is Beginners and Winners. And we meet at the Wrightsville United Methodist Church on one night a week, Thursday night. And we got a great group. If y'all ever get down there to the beach, Everybody likes to go to the beach. I know I can't get out of my driveway. and if you get down there, come to our group. You'll like it up there. We got a good group up there. I've been sober 24 years. When my daddy died, he was sober 22 years. And the thing that I want to tell y'all is when I came in here, I was going to try this thing out for 6 months. You know, I'd quit drinking twice for 6 months. I knew I could go 6 months without taking a drink. But I didn't know a thing in the world about AA. I didn't have any idea what it was. So what happened when I had this wreck I had a bad wreck. And the judge sentenced me to AA. I wasn't smart enough to get here by myself, but I knew I was having trouble with liquor, or why else would a person try quitting for 6 months? You know? I was thinking maybe I could cut back, and later on in life I could drink like a gentleman. I had all these different thoughts. You know, and until I got into AA, y'all are the ones that showed me the way, or showed me the light, how to step out to the light. You know, I was born and raised in Raleigh, and when I got 17 years old, I decided I would drop out of high school. So I dropped out of high school and graduated the 10th grade, and I went into the service. I call that the College of No Knowledge. I went into the Coast Guard for 4 years. I came out of the Coast Guard, I was 21 years old. I had 2 DWIs and had to get a bus home. You know, I had a car, but somebody had to send after it, you know, because I couldn't drive anymore. Couldn't make the payments. The car was brought back home. They sold the car. I had to make up like $300-400 difference when I got a job. So anyway, I went to work for my daddy at the Raleigh Knee-High Bottling Company. And I worked out there, and I did pretty good running with some route trucks and whatnot. And I said, boy, this is not for me. This is just like too hard. I need me a job with a necktie or something. You know, I want me an easy job. And that's the way I was thinking. And I'd get to thinking, I said, well, you got no education. What you going to do? I don't know. So I went looking for non-educated jobs that you could get with a necktie. You know? I found a job at Term Plan Finance Company, and they'd hire you to go in there and chase accounts. And I wore a necktie. I had my own desk. Man, it was neat. I lasted there 4 months in that job. So after I got fired from that job, I was hanging around 5 Points, and they had a nightclub up there called the Cat's Eye. And they had a little bar right next to it called the Mouse Trap. That was my place, boy. That was the first bar in Raleigh that had couches and stuff in it. You know, most of them got those old hard seats or a bench up against the wall. This one had coffee tables, kind of like the country club, but it was the Mouse Trap. You know, you go in there sometimes, every now and then somebody get knocked over a table or something. You say, well, maybe this isn't so country clubby out here, you know. But I was sitting in there one night, and a boy came up to me. His name was Sonny Harmon, and his daddy owned Harmon Motor Company in Raleigh. He said, Dale said, you ought to sell cars. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, I can't sell cars. I've never sold nothing in my life. He said, you can sell cars. He says, as much BS as you got. He said, I know you can sell cars, you know. And so I took that as a compliment, of course. He said, come on down to the Ford place on Monday. So I went down there Monday, got me a job at the Ford place. I can tell you from the very start, I had no idea where I was going. I didn't study for any kind of profession. I was just looking through the want ads for a job. I didn't care what it was. I had a car payment due, you know, and I needed to get it made. I had no drive at all except to make some money to make a car payment. And so I went down there that Monday, and I remember the guy's name, Fred Handy. He told me, he said, come on, he said, you're hired. After I talked to him for a while, I said, well, I ain't wrote nothing down. He said, well, fill out them papers and all of a sudden. So I went back there and filled out some employment papers and sat back there, and he showed me how to fill out a bill of sale on a car. He said, and then he told me, he said, you need to find out whether they're going to trade or whether they want to buy straight. Give me little lessons, you know. And that was my schooling I had. So I sailed out the door. Here comes this set of customers came in the door. So I sailed out the door out there. Hey, how y'all doing? I said, fine. I said, I'm Dale. I introduced myself. I said, what can I help you with? They said, well, we've been looking for a car. And I sold it, the first one. I got out there. I said, this is kind of easy. Man, I went in there, signed them up. At the end of that month, I had made twice as much money as I ever made in the finance company. My first month back. So I had found what I was going to do, you know. Later on, I ran into a stonemason, and the stonemason told me, he said, son, let me tell you what you need to do. He said, find out something you like and figure out how to make money with it. Well, I always liked cars, so I had stumbled into the right job, you know. You look back on this years later. I stayed in the car business for 40 more years. If you look back on this with a 20/20 hindsight like I've got right now, you can see God's grace written all over it. A poor stumbled bum running around, didn't know what he was going to do. All he had these ideas like he wanted to have a necktie. You know, I wasn't necktie material. So I stayed there, and I finally moved to, I got a couple of DUIs during that time. My wife would sit up on the front at the courthouse, you know, she'd be maybe pregnant. That would look good. Yeah, I got to have a job, you know. And you know, I finally left Raleigh after I had gone to the Chevrolet place and worked for about 5 years. And it was really a geographical cure, you know. I was tired of getting drunk driving tickets. I'd had like maybe 5 or 6 drunk driving tickets, but I hadn't been convicted but on one of them. So the other 5 didn't count. You ever had any drunk drivers do? 1. You know, so not knowing that it was a geographical cure, I sailed down to Wilmington, sold my house, bought another house down there, and went to work at the Chevrolet place down there. I was there for about 1.5 years, and the guy that owned the place walked up to me, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, how would you like to be our manager over here? I said, you think you can handle that? I didn't know what he was even talking about. I said, sure. Man, nothing to it. He said, really? I said, really? And so they made me the manager over there. I'll tell you why he picked me, because he told me why he did. I showed initiative, he told me. You know, it doesn't require education to show initiative. You know, I would be out there doing stuff that other people wouldn't do. You know, lining cars up, taking cars back to the shop, helping keep them looking good, you know, so we could sell. And he saw it and hired me just that quick, just like that. So I stayed there about 2.5 years as the manager there and got fired. I was coming down the hallway one day. I was looking pretty good. Had a suit on, my neck piece, some of those pointed-toed shoes, those expensive shoes that you buy. When you're a manager, you got to wear them. And I'm coming down the hallway, and he said, Dale, you got a minute? I said, yes, sir. I popped on in there looking good, you know. Straightened myself all up, went in there. I didn't know whether it was a raise or what. He said, well, I'm going to have to let you go. What for? It's just been too much mischief. We've got too much extracurricular activity on you, which means I was hanging around the bars and joints and getting in trouble, and it was all over town and that kind of stuff. So I left there. So I said, well, I'll just go get me a job at another place. I wandered around. They would all hire me, but none of them would give me a demonstrator. That's a car to drive. You got to drive your own car. We ain't insuring you. And so I got mad about that thing, you know, and I told my wife, I said, you know, they're going to hire me up there. And they won't let me have a car, and they want me to sell cars. I'm not going to be a manager anymore. And she says, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. So I thought about it for a day or two, and I had a Christmas savings account up there with $3,200 in it. And I said, when am I going to get that savings account back? He said, well, we'll process it and give you a check when you get your papers and you leave here. I said, okay. So I left that place for $3,200. So I decided I was going to go into car business with $3,200. And at the time, you could buy $100 and $200 and $300 cars, not anymore. They crushed them all during this last deal. The government did. And so I went and bought 10 cars at $300 a piece. Was $3,000, and that's what I went to car business with. Stayed in the car business till I retired, September the 5th of '95. And when I sold out in '95, I had accumulated 2 car lots. I had another car lot beside it, one going on the east and west corridor, one on the north and south corridor. And my drinking was just roaring. It was roaring. I bought a brand new Lincoln Town car, 90 model, I think it was, black with a black top, a sunroof, silver and red stripes, chromium wheels. I mean, it was pretty. Had a television antenna on the back. There's a little thing that pops up, it looks like in the middle of your trunk for the radio in the car. And I look kind of like one of those, what do you call them people that represent countries and stuff? Yeah. Yeah, I look like some kind of attaché or something representing a country, something riding by on that car. And that was the car I wrecked, Went down and played golf one day. Back then I was golfing, like my friend Billy. And we were down at the Cape. And so I got my big black Lincoln down there, and we're drinking beer, and we played 18 holes. We drank about 24 beers. Then we decided we'd play 18 more, and we got another case of beer. Then when we got finished with that, we decided we were going to go ahead and leave since we drank all that. So I got in the car. I wasn't doing too bad, really, And so I got in the car, and I pulled up to the gate to leave the Cape. And I said, well, I could go to the right and go down here and speak to some of our fishing buddies at Carolina Beach. Maybe have a drink or two with them and remember the good old times. Or I can go left and go home. Which way you think I went? Went down to have a few with my buddies down there. And I remember I got into that restaurant right on the water down there. And I walked in the door, and big shotism was one of my things. I had the Lincoln. I wanted to be a big shot. And so I went in there and I said, the drink's on me. Your money ain't no good when Dale's here. And boy, they all rushed up to the bar. Woo, up to the bar like that. And I said, And we sat down, we drank a few of them and everything. And then the guy come over and told me how much the bar bill was. He said, how long you want to run that bar bill? I said, cut it off. He cut it off. I paid that bar tab and I blacked out. I don't remember much after that. I was in the restroom or something coming out one time when I come in and out of a blackout. And somebody said, you want me to drive you home? I said, oh no, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'll straighten up in a minute. And I don't know if y'all were like that, but I just never wanted anybody driving me. I don't know what it is. I see some people that drink all the time. They say, you drive and hand the keys to somebody. It was like going on the roller coaster or something to drive and drink. It was kind of fun to me. And until I had that wreck. But I made it just about home when I had that wreck, and I hit the back end of a van. There was a man and his wife and his 2 kids in that van. And it total lost the van, turned the van over in the middle of Oleander Drive, pushed the engine of my car up into the front seat where I was. I got 19 stitches across here, and it crushed my sternum here on the steering wheel. And when the paramedics came there, I was told that they thought I was dead in the car. They said, we think he's dead in the car. And the guy that I knew, his name was Bob Church. He owned the barbecue place right in front of where I wrecked it, Flip's Barbecue. And he said, I've seen him a whole lot worse than that in Vietnam. He said, let's pull him out of there. He was a veteran. So they pulled me out of there, and I was dead, all right. I was dead drunk. I landed up in the trauma unit over at the hospital. The people in the other car went to the small hospital. There were 2 in Wilmington. I went to the big one. When I got to the big hospital, they stitched me up, wired me up. I had needles and tubes, and I could lay there and not have to go to the bathroom. I mean, they had me just stay here as long as you want. And I remember I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, my God, I didn't know where I was. I come out of that blackout, I didn't know where I was. I looked down and I said, all this mess, all of it, and all these tubes coming out of it and on my face and stuff. And when I done like this, the needles would cramp up in here. And I was just wired. And one of the nurses says, he's awake now. He's awake now. When what they should have said was, he's come to now. He's come to now. But they came in there and they said, your wife's been outside. And I said, well, can you get her to come in here? I said, yeah. So she came in there, and I remember asking my wife, what happened? She says, how do I know what happened? I wasn't in the car, you know. She said, you've been in the car wreck. I said, well, whose fault was it? She said, well, I don't know. There's a highway patrolman out there. And I said, that wasn't good news. So I kind of wanted to lay in the hospital and continue to be hurt and dead for a while till he left, you know. And eventually she came back in there and told me, said, well, he left a while ago and everything. I said, well, you got to go home and get this under control. She said, well, what am I going to do? I said, well, call up our attorney, Jack, and tell him what's happening. We need to get this under control. And so she went home and did just exactly that. And then Jack, I later talked to him, he said, you know, I was wondering what the hell she wanted. When she called me and told me to get it under control, he's in the trauma unit, he's right where he needs to be. I said, what am I going to get under control? And so, I mean, that proves the fact to me that I always had to think I had control of everything. I didn't have control of anything. I had control of my job. I didn't have control of my driving. I had control of my drinking. I didn't have control of my life. I mean, I was just self-will run right, just like the book says. And so I came out of there in 2 days and they dismissed me. And I had all these stitches on the front of my head and a big thing around my head. And I got home, and when I got home, I started picking at those stitches and stuff, you know. And I went back in a week, and he gave me some pain pills to take because it was going to be terribly painful. And I laid around and wallowed for about 2 days or 3 days. Then I got dressed, took a shower as best I could, and went up to get those stitches out. You know, when I got up there, I told the man, I said, the doctor that was going to take the stitches out, I said, he said, you've been messing with these? I said, yeah, a couple of them came out kind of easy. I was going to save a trip up here, but some of them I couldn't get loose. And he said, oh, brother. You know, I said, but I had a lot of pain. I said, I'm going to need another jar of those pills. And he says, how many of those pills are in that jar? And I reached in my jacket pocket and I pulled them out, and I had about 4 pills left. And he gave me a 30-day supply, and it had been 5 days. You know? And he said, you ain't getting no more of them pills, you know. So that's my drug story. I could have been a drug addict just as easy as an alcoholic, you know. I mean, I liked them. I liked the effect on them, you know. So he wouldn't give me any more of those. He put me on Tylenol 1000s, and I left there. And then the bad news came. My attorney told me, said, you know, it's state law in North Carolina. When you get a DUI nowadays, he said, you have to go to AA. Worst sentence I've ever had in my life. The judge sentenced me to 20 meetings of AA. Piece of paper, got to get it signed, get the chairman to sign it, to go there. And I'd already had an argument with the lady that did the assessment on me, you know. And she turned out to be a long-term friend of mine, Jane A. I don't know if any of y'all know her in here, but she worked at the psychiatrist's office and did those assessments. And she knew my daddy. I didn't know it. And so I went to my first AA meeting, and I saw a man standing there. His name was Sandy Stewart. I say his name now. He's deceased now. But he had 1 foot up on that cinder block building. And 1 foot on the ground, and them 2 hands right there on a Winston cigarette. He was just smoking out at this place in the woods where they had to meet, called the Kitchen Group. And they met at this place called the Fire Hut. The firemen owned it, and they had they drank liquor on one side and had AA meetings on this side. But it was the dadgonest thing you ever seen. And so I went in there, and I said, hey, Stanley, I said, I ain't seen you in 4 or 5 years. Where you been? He didn't even answer my question. He said, I was wondering how long it was going to take for you to get here. Well, see, everybody knew I was an alcoholic except me. I didn't want to be an alcoholic, so therefore I wasn't. You know? And so he said, I've been here for about 4 or 5 years, I think he said at the time, you know. And that's the reason I hadn't seen him, was because he went to AA. And the places I hung around, you know, he didn't hang around. So I went in there to that first meeting. I never will forget it. I sat down on a little stool in front of a little kitchen bar there. And there was a lady sitting on that table. And I'm sitting there and she's talking on that coffee table. She's sitting on a coffee table in the front of the room. And a cockroach come running right across the floor in front of me. And he got right in front of me and I hit him like that right there. And I said, my God, what has happened to me? I'm down here in the woods with a bunch of drunks. Cockroaches running around. How did I ever get here? Well, I'll tell you how I got there. I drank myself back. You know, so that was the start of my AA. When I was leaving that meeting that day, you know, it was pretty interesting. And when I left that meeting that day, there was a guy named Donald Bass, and he was standing there. And he come by on an old 67 Cadillac 2-door. Pretty light green with a black top on it. And then I said, but old car looks right good. I said, are those brush streaks in the hood of your car? He said, yeah, I painted. I'm a painter. I painted it with a brush. I said, damn, it don't look good, you know. Now I'm thinking I'm going to get into paint some of mine for 50 apiece, you see. And I'd sell them, you know. And he said, I might get you to paint one or two of mine. He said, I might do that one day. And he took off on that old Cadillac. Well, I came back to the same meeting Thursday. And they said, did you hear about Donald? I said, no. What happened? He said he committed suicide, shot himself. You know? So there I am. I've had the experience of, I was wondering how long it's going to take to get you here. Cockroaches running across this nasty place, and I've landed up with all these drunks and people committing suicide. You know what I mean? I got to thinking, maybe I better take this serious. I mean, well, why you reckon you did that? I asked 100 people, none of them knew. He just wouldn't or couldn't get it, you know. And so that's how I started my AA, you know. I got a sponsor. They badgered me till I got a sponsor, and I got a sponsor. I got a sponsor by the name of Chris Phillips, and he's deceased now. And he started taking me through the steps, you know, and I refused to do anything much, you know. So at 4 months, I got stark raving sober. Do y'all know what that is? I'm raving, I'm mad, I'm restless, I'm irritable, I'm discontent, I don't like nothing, and I ain't drinking. You know? I'm just about to go off in the flames. And I called up my sponsor and I told him, I said, look here, if sobriety is going to be like this, I'd just as soon be drunk. You know? He said, I know exactly what you need, exactly. And I said, my God, why didn't he tell me the secret to begin with? You know? He said, what you need is a drink. He said, I'm giving you permission. Go on up to the corner, get you a 6-pack, and see if that'll hold you till you can get over to the liquor store. He said, you need a drink. And see, I knew in the back of my mind, see, my daddy had been in AA for 22 years. And I knew that your sponsor ain't supposed to tell you to go take a drink. See, if I'd have known who the AA police were, I would have turned him in. But I didn't know who they were. You know? I said, for crying out loud, you can't tell me to go drink. He said, well, I'm just giving you permission. He said, you just assume because it's going to happen eventually. I said, why do you think that? He said, because you refuse to do anything. You won't do any action at all. You sit around, you complain, you talk, and you yah-rob, and you ain't doing nothing. He said, and you're just going to get drunk eventually anyway, so why don't you just go ahead and shorten your time up and get drunk? And it's something about it, when he gave me permission to drink, something just backed up in me. I said, well, I ain't going to do it. I mean, I guess it was the rebellious streak in me. I ain't going to do it. If he tells me I can, I ain't. And all that. I said, well, what do you think I ought to do? And he said, my God, I never thought that would come from your lips. You're asking me what to do? He said, you know everything. I said, well, I know a lot of stuff. And he said, why don't you get to work on that drinking history, and we'll sit down and get started on this step and everything. And so that evening, I locked myself in a room and did a drinking history. And And I started moving on from there. Took me, at 7 months, I had gotten through the steps. Took me like 3 months to get through them completely, formally through the steps and making a lot of my amends and stuff. And that's when I started taking, I said, there's a guy asked me to sponsor him. I was scared to death. He comes and said, will you be my sponsor? And I just, I don't know. I'll have to call my sponsor. And so I called him up. I said, the guy asked me to sponsor him. What am I going to do? He said, well, go ahead and do it. He said, you're already through 9. You're working 10. He said, well, just go ahead on. You know how to get him that far. And we'll be finished by the time he gets done. I said, well, okay. So I went back and told him I'd do it. Well, I started telling him about Bill and Bob and the boys and going through the book and all that stuff like I've been doing. He went directly out and got drunk. I called up my sponsor. I told him, he went and got drunk. He said, get you another one. So I'm in the AA meetings. I continue going to AA meetings. And another one came along. I told him about Bill and Bob and the boys and all that stuff. And he went and got drunk. I called him. I said, got another one drunk. He said, you ain't got nobody drunk. He said, get you another one. So I got the third one and he got drunk. Then I called him back up and told him, I said, look, I'm just going to start doing ashtrays. And he's setting up for the meat. I'm going to start doing this other kind of stuff because I believe I'm killing off newcomers. And he said, let me ask you something. So what is that? He said, are you drunk? I said, hell no. I said, I'm trying to help them guys if they won't let me. And he said, well, you're batting 1,000. The object of this game is you to come into AA, go to meetings, try to help people and not get drunk. It says in the 12th step that you tried to carry the message. It didn't say you saved them. You know, and so I got to thinking about the thing, and that was right. I had my mind on trying to help somebody else and help them move forward, you know, even as hard-headed as I was trying to move forward. And then when they got drunk, you know, I thought maybe I had something to do with it. He told me, he said, you don't get anybody sober and you don't get anybody drunk. Your job is not to drink. And my job is to carry you through the steps and try to help you. You know, and I said, oh yeah, I get it now. And my fourth, I got to tell you all this, my fourth sponsor, he got sober. He's got 22 or 3, Steve. 22 or 3 years now. But I always say he saved my life, you know, because I was about ready to give up sponsorship till Steve come along. But Steve, you know, he was a hard case. We'd walk around the circle, down there, that 2.5 mile circle down there at Wrightsville Beach, and he'd ask me important questions like, when am I going to have a girlfriend? And I'd give him the look, like, how the hell do I know when you're going to have a girlfriend, you know? And I'd say, well, you'll have a girlfriend when you're ready. I got him. We'd walk on about halfway on around that circle, about a mile, he'd be thinking the whole time. He'd ask me a question by the time we got up to a movie theater in town. He'd say, when will I be ready? Then we got to walking on around again, you know. I mean, he had his mind on that girlfriend, you know. And we got just about all the way around, and I said, you'll have a girlfriend when you're ready. You know, that's what I told him. And so he said, this is not doing me any good at all. When I ask you a question that's going in circles. I said, well, I don't know when you're going to have a girlfriend. Well, I'm here to tell you he's got a girlfriend now, and it was about 19 years later. Yeah, he's dating now, man, hot and heavy. But to come in here and and go from where I was to the way I do now is nothing short of a miracle for me. I'm here to tell y'all I don't take any of the credit for it. I give the God of my understanding the credit. A guy that was down there that used to irritate me bad when I first came in, his name was Clyde Sykes, and he'd say, I'm sober by the grace of God and a little bit of effort on my part. And that describes me to a T. I'm sober by God's grace. He was running my life before I got in here. He's running it now. He was running it when I thought I was running it. And the only thing I've done is those steps and go out and try to help somebody else. And I've stayed sober. So I try my best not to say no to things in AA. They were begging around about somebody to go to the prison out there and work. And I said, oh, no, I ain't going out there. Prisons, they'll stab me with a toothbrush. You know, they sharpen toothbrushes up. They'll kill you in there. And I'd seen too much television. I'd been watching the FBI and all that stuff, you know. And so I went out there one night and I sat down and I've never seen such a grateful bunch of people to be in prison. They were out there at that pre-release center, 025 in Wilmington. And so after the meeting, they would say, boy, we sure do appreciate you coming out there. They'd shake your hand, pat you on the back. I mean, you could tell that they were grateful. Somebody would come out there and talk to them and share with them. And I said, well, this ain't so bad, you know. And I said, well, I think I'll do it for a month or two, you know, kind of help them out here, you know. Well, that was 10 years ago. And I used to wonder why my daddy all the time went to that prison. Every Sunday night he'd get up and go to prison out there and eat with them at the Triangle meeting out there. You remember? And he'd go out there every Sunday night and eat with them. And I got to thinking about what Jane told me when she gave me that assessment 20 years before. When I raised hell, they said, this test says that you're an acute alcoholic. And I said, who says? And I jumped up in front of her desk. I said, take me to him. Then she said, sit down, Dale. I said, don't get so excited. He said, it's just a computer test. He said, if you went in there, you'd have to talk to the computer. But Jane was the one, she was the very one that I saw coming back from an international convention. She was in the seat right beside me, coming back. Just a coincidence. She leaned over to me, she told me, she said, how long you got in now? And I said, 14 years. And she said, good gracious, time flies. She had told me that day that it wouldn't be too bad to follow in your daddy's footsteps. And that made me mad because, you see, the worst thing in the world I could ever be was an alcoholic. And now, the luckiest I could ever be is to be an alcoholic. I understand stuff now that I never used to even think I'd start to understand. I have seen stuff in here that is just unreal. Regular people don't get to see this. 2 Sundays ago, our preacher at our church, who regards our AA meeting as the best outreach group in the church, he had a sermon on AA. I was ushering that morning, and I opened up the little booklet, Sunday brochure, and I opened that thing up, and I looked at it, and it was the 12 steps inside of a church bulletin. You know? I went in there and sat down, and he gave the service, and he talked about the spirituality in AA and how he wished that the people in this church would chip in and help each other as good as the people in AA do. You know, he said you could really learn a lot by going through these steps. And he also told everybody in that church that this is a copy of the steps. Now y'all carry them home and just take alcohol out and substitute it for any problem you got. I'm powerless over drugs. I'm powerless over sex, over whatever you got problems with, depression, anything you got. Said you can take them and use these 12 steps on them, you know. And I never thought I'd ever hear a preacher say anything like that. And he did, you know. So I've come to have a terrific appreciation, not through just my experience, but through what other people think about it, you know. And so today I think I'm going to keep sober and keep coming back and doing all I can for AA. I forgot to mention my wife and my children when I was coming through there. I've got a daughter that's got 14 years in this program. She was in a year and a half before she ever told me. And I asked her, I said, well, why did you not ever tell me that you were in AA? She said, well, Dad, to be honest with you, I thought you'd micromanage me. She had that on the money. She was right. And my wife, she had a stroke 15 years this October ago. So I've been looking after my wife for all that amount of time. If I'd have been drunk, I'd have left her in the hospital and left. I mean, I didn't have any idea of doing the next right thing. I learned everything I learned about being a decent human being in AA. and they ain't nothing much I hadn't heard in AA. So, I mean, when they tell me those 5 steps, I can listen to them. I can relate to them a lot of times. So, if you're new in AA, stick around because it gets better. You know, I mean, it just gets better and better and better. And I'd like to thank you, Steve, for inviting me up here again, you know, and it's really great to be back up here with y'all again because y'all were one of the finest groups I ever came to see. Okay, thank you.